Hello everybody and welcome to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be talking about graphical settings. I've had a few questions on it, and basically I had a few people come up to me in some of the comments and saying, you know, how does certain things affect the game and what it all means really. People tend to just throw out like basically this here where it says a basic standard. As you can notice, most of everything else is grayed out because it's simplified. So you say, right, well, I want it either the best, my PC can't handle it, or my PC really can't handle it. And that's about as much as people go into. However, some people like to know what things actually do, so I'm going to try and hopefully explain what most of these things do. Starting from, we'll discuss a little bit about anti-aliasing, I can't say that, upscaling, display modes and stuff like that, but the main majority of it is obviously the stuff at the bottom here. This is the stuff that people basically want to know about. Okay, let's start from the top. Anti-aliasing, or whatever you want to call it. I hate that word. Obviously you got a few options, and I'm going to go through what these options are. So basically, anti-aliasing is a way to smooth out the edges of an image. So most of the image is built like in a staircase motion. So basically, as you go around a corner, it's not a curve. Well, obviously it is a curve, but the way you look at it, if you was to zoom in, it's like a staircase. So it's not actually a smooth edge. Obviously everything's made of pixels, and obviously pixels, when you go smaller and smaller, become basically like little cubes almost. Not quite, but they are. And the way anti-aliasing works is basically it kind of, if you imagine you got a bit of smudge, it'll smudge it out. So it slightly blurs it, but it makes it not look blurred, which is kind of weird, but there you go. And obviously you got a few options here. TAA is temporal aliasing, which basically it works over time when there's motion in the game. You got SSAA, which uses multiple samples of a frame. So a frame is obviously, we all know what an FPS frame rate is and stuff like that. It basically takes multiples of them, and they kind of smooth it out so you can not see it as obvious. However, that takes a lot of computer power to manage that, but it gives quite high quality images. You got MSAA, which is multi-sample. So it takes multiple of these frames and adds them together, rather than using basically it uses more of them to try and blend it. So it's just a little bit higher than the SSAA. Again, this is resource intense heavy, so this one will draw a lot of power off your GPU. Because obviously it uses more than one sample in the frame. And then we've got FXAA, which uses fewer samples in the frame, and kind of gives you like the middle ground really of the settings. So don't expect as good as, you know, SSAA or MSAA. And it tries to eliminate the edges of the 3D images. So that's anti-aliasing. This is going to be your number one for performance eating. So if you want to blow your GPU up or something like that, that's one of the things you want to use. Now, upscaling is it's one of them where people think upscaling is where you're basically taking an image and blowing it up or something like that. This is something AMD are introducing, and you notice it actually gives you a little bit of a background. But basically, AMD have introduced a very simple and effective way of improving the image definition and performance. So what it does is it basically uses like an algorithm to try and it try and blends the image a little bit more. It's really hard to explain what these things do. This is like way above my pay grade kind of thing. However, I am going to try and explain it so you can basically figure out what it does for your game. It's basically called a temporal upscaler. It uses algorithms in a low resolution image and uses the data from your current gameplay. So it's like uses a frame over a time, and then it applies its own anti-aliasing into the mix of it. So it's a bit like the temporal anti-aliasing, but a little bit better. So it'll kind of use stuff from the past and also uses images ready for the future of you moving, and it'll kind of blend the two together a little bit better. And that's not the best way of describing it, but hopefully it makes you understand a little bit more. It's supposed to be less performance intensive, especially when using AMD. So that's that. These here, borderless window, obviously is how you're playing it. You can play it in borderless window, full screen or windowed. Don't need to explain that too much, I think everybody knows what it is. Also select GPU, if you've got multiple GPUs. I know some people who stream have multiple GPUs, that comes into effect. Obviously your screen that you want, and then the present mode, which is your VSync. Again, VSync is one of them things where I'm never 100% on them, but it's short for vertical synchronization. And basically, it's a display technology that the best way for me to describe this is you imagine your GPU is probably faster than your monitor. Your monitor's got a certain refresh rate, so it can only display so much in a certain period of time, and your GPU will sometimes throw more at it than it can manage. So what it does a thing where it basically tears the graphics. So basically the monitor's trying to keep up, misses some of the frames that the GPU sends, and you get the tearing effect of your graphics. This basically kind of tries to stop that, or the GPU will wait for your monitor to be ready. Then obviously that can affect your FPS and stuff like that. This is more graphic card intensive, so if you've got a good graphics card you can use that. Color correction is just it's one of them where if you want color correction on certain things you can do. I'm not a big fan of color correction. It's one of them I don't really see much for myself. But basically what it does is it'll apply sort of filter. So there's a lot of people who like to have a certain style to the graphics, and that's basically all that does. That's just, it can be a little bit performance intense heavy, but generally it's just things like it'll give a more cinematic view. Obviously you can have a play around with that if you wish. Your gamma, obviously your brightness, well it's not technically your brightness, it's kind of the offset of the black grey scale, but it does look like it affects your brightness. Field of view, or field of focus some people call it, or stuff like that. This basically means how much of the surroundings you can see in that one panel. So you imagine people with 20/20 vision can see more to the left and right, the peripherals. People without obviously have more of a focus in the center. Now this is the best way I can describe it. That field of focus basically means you're giving yourself 20/20 vision. Even though you don't get the peripheral vision, you now can see more on either side. Great if you're using a widescreen monitor or something like that, or a curved monitor, or for people who want more detail in one screen. Some people find it a little bit harder to see because everything's kind of blown outward. So that's something you need to kind of see if you want to do it yourself. Now let's talk about the graphics quality. This is something that probably a lot of people want to know about. Your graphics quality does what it says on the tin. This is basically your overall graphics quality, which generally is what most people will select. If you however want to change it, you can select the custom, and I will show you that. It will highlight everything so you can change everything. So let's start from the top. Texture quality, again, does exactly what it says on the tin. This is how higher quality you want your textures. You imagine when we first played video games, it was basically just an image on a screen, and there wasn't really much to know what that thing was wearing. It was just pixels, and it did look great. Over time, we've now got it where things like, as you can see the spaceship there, you can see the level of detail in its armor, in its engines, in its landing platform. You can tell that some of that's metal, you can tell some of it's not metal, and it's got paint on it, because the level of quality has allowed you to define what that texture is. Drop that, and that obviously means things are a little bit more back to the old school days. That can help with your performance as well. All of these, obviously, the lower you drop them, the better performance you're going to get out of your PC. This game goes to try and make things look as best as possible, and I think a lot of people forget that it's a lot of detail in a small space, so dropping a few things down might help you. Shadows. Again, does exactly what it says on the tin. Provides a shadowing effect on everything, so you can see the light from the sun there, or from a sun, is reflecting there and giving you the shadow effect here. Soft shadows just kind of makes it a little bit smoother, so you get that shadowy effect from like your ships and stuff like that look a little bit better. That looks great. SSAO. This is one this is where you start getting into the nitty-gritty of things that I really don't understand, but I try to. Screen space ambient occlusion. It's a computer graphics technique, basically, that it kind of affects the real time of your gameplay. It's the way the shadows actually, the best way I could describe it, or the best way I see it, is basically it affects how the shadows are seen. So you imagine you look at this from a different angle, the reflection of the shadows would work differently. There's little crevices and stuff like that get picked up. That's kind of what it affects. Glow quality, that's the new glow system on, the glow quality is the glow effects of your station. Sorry, that I was jumping ahead of myself there. So again, things that like pop out here, these glow effects here, these are all the things, these small bits of detail really pop out when you're using a high level of glow quality. Again, if you want to increase your performance, you can drop that down and it will improve your overall quality, especially when it comes to things like the boring. You can see there, look at these reflections here. These will be much less detailed if you drop these certain settings down here. UI glow quality, that's the actual UI itself, so this bright highlight thing, this new one to the 7.0, that's what this is. Chromatic aberration. Okay, so again, this is something that I'm trying to understand as best I can. I understand it in my own head, but trying to explain it outward is a little bit harder. But basically, it distorts the colour that gives the effect that you're looking through a lens. So things like this here, these little glow effects and stuff like that. Again, they're a mixture of the two. But basically, it's the blue and red auras that you get that you would expect to see from a camera. It tries to make it feel a little bit more realistic. Again, if you're struggling with performance, that's one of the things you want to look at. That's actually one of the simpler things you can take off, to be fair. Next one is distortion. Again, a little bit obvious, but not quite as obvious as you'd expect. The best way to describe it, or the best way I find it, is somebody used to explain it to me, is in nature, nothing is a straight line. And this comes to things like anything you do in nature, you got to remember that nothing is a straight line. There are all curves, bends, and all sorts in it. There's no perfect straight line. This basically takes a perfect image and distorts it slightly so it looks more realistic. Best way I can think about it. So you imagine when you're looking at a pool of water and the light reflects off it. That kind of is how distortion would help. Again, you imagine like planets, they got the oceans and stuff, that's going to reflect lighting from the sun. That's going to try and help it make it look realistic. So again, that could help you with your performance. Parallax occlusion mapping. Okay, so this one's, to be fair, these next couple are a little bit of like, I understand what it does to my own game, but trying to explain it when I'm asked is a little bit trickier. But basically this boosts the detail of the texture quality of a surface to give it more depth. So you imagine you could have a flat piece of plate, but then when you look at it, it's got grooves and curves and stuff like that on its surface. This will pull that out more, so you can actually see the level of quality on your surfaces. Again, another great one for dropping down slightly that you probably won't notice too much. Obviously, you put it right down, you will notice it, but you can get away with dropping it a little bit for your performance. Level of detail, or LOD settings. So this one is definitely one you're going to want to consider changing if you want to improve your performance. This definitely directly relates to your CPU rather than your GPU. For some reason, it shouldn't do. GPU is the main thing for everything on graphics generally. However, this seems to, personally, it has had effect on my CPU. And that's basically it's the rendering and the complexity of a 3D model. You drop this down, your 3D model becomes basic. Back to the old days of, you know, them things that are just made of squares stuck together to make a person. Obviously you don't get that bad, but basically it'll lower it down and hopefully improve your performance. Draw distance, or in this case effect distance, basically means how much is in your screen at the one time. If you're really struggling with things like the problem with this game is you've got two factors to think about, and I'm going to try and explain this for people who play the game so they can hopefully affect their own gameplay. The game plays all the time. It's a sandbox. It's basically like you have a table and everything on the table is all thinking and doing stuff at once. You then have everything around the player, which is real time. Now they are both real time, however obviously on a map it's simulated. So what that means is it doesn't actually put a physical object on the screen and move it around. It simulates what it would do and then gives you a basic version of that, i.e. the map. Everything around you is physical objects. So the more objects you have in screen, so when you've got yourself your massive fleet of 500 fighters and you go, I know I'm going to wipe out the Xenon, and they send another 500 fighters back to you. Or sure, they're watching your light show or your fireworks show or whatever you want to call it. Most people complain that this then affects their gameplay. Now a lot of people say also whilst you are letting the game run and more things are built, it affects your gameplay because it's trying to then think about. Now this is where your CPU comes into it, because it's trying to think about and simulate what it's doing, whilst your graphics card's screaming its brains out going, we've got 500 fighters we need to put on this screen. That does have a big effect on it. So if you drop this down, it drops basically how the level of detail is on your screen. So things like these asteroids, if I drop this down, more than likely we might not see these asteroids. They might disappear off screen. Or the level of detail that they have will drop considerably. So things like the shadows, so you can see like the edge of the asteroid is lit up by the sun, that would all go. It would just be a block somewhere in the screen and it'd be hard to see. So hopefully that helps it. The radar is where you want to drop if you're struggling, because it steals a little bit of GPU but takes a lot of CPU to produce your radar. So if you really are struggling, drop that down a little bit, it should help you. Screen space reflection is basically, it reuses your screen space to create this reflection. So this is where you see your ships. So it'll take your ship and put a reflection of it on whatever station you're flying by, and it then uses the two combined by the direction of the light source that's in the engine to provide you with a shadow. Again, this is both GPU and CPU intensive because it uses a lot of simulation to simulate where your ship is and place that on your, on your screen. Reflection probes. This is one that even I don't understand much. I have tried to understand it because I'm going to be honest with you, I'm interested in stuff like this. But basically, it's a Unity feature that it perceives the environment within a specified area. and then it will reflect certain things from that. So you imagine when you're playing, so whereas before the previous one, the screen space reflection would take whatever's on your screen, this takes everything around you, picks up everything out of the place, and figures out what would reflect into your field of focus. And obviously it has it prepped off screen, so when you turn around it's still there. So they're kind of both doing the same thing. They're kind of both doing the same thing. However, one does it in an area that you can see, one does it in an area that you can't yet see, and they kind of feed into the two. There's also things like effects that affect water and stuff like that. That's when the reflection probes come into it. So rather than just taking what's on your screen, so if you looked at a body of water, you wouldn't see much around you. You'd only see basically, if you could see your hand in front of you, you'd basically see the reflection of your hand in the water. The probes then take the surrounding area, giving you another larger reflection. And volumetric fog is as you would expect it to be. It's the volumetric fog is one of them where some people can find that this affects them, because it's again another thing that is, it's simulated rather than it's a simulation rather than it is graphical, but it's things like, for example, if you go through an asteroid field in X4 and you've got the gas section, the gas is obviously a gas, and as you have reflections of the light and stuff, that would affect how that fog looks to you. Best way I can describe it, I think, to not overcomplicate things. Best way to think about it is when you're looking at a game like your first-person shooters, and you're looking where the sunlight hits, you get that like kind of foggy effect. That's basically what it is. It's more effects of lighting. And then obviously your last couple of bits is your cockpit glass reflection if you want reflections on it, and then the video capture if you're using that. I hope that's given you a rundown of all of the graphics. That is as high detail as I can try to explain it, and I know a lot of people have struggled with figuring out what everything does and how it affects and the performance and stuff like that. I really hope me going through it that way has helped you understand it a little bit better, because a lot of this is simplified, just the effects of lighting. that's the best way of looking at it, and how smooth things look. So hopefully that helps you be able to improve your gameplay without taking too much detail away from the game and how things do affect it. If you've got any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. I do apologise, I am not an expert on all of this. That's why I don't make computer games. However, I do hope my explanations have helped you, and I appreciate your feedback. But until next time, everybody, thank you very much for watching. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you'd like to join me for more content, not just X4 but mainly X4 content, and obviously hit that bell notification if you want to be notified when I do put videos. So, but until next time, everybody, take care for now, and I shall see you all on the next one. Bye bye for now.